Okay, today we're going to talk about bits and bitting. There's a lot of misconceptions about equipment that we use on our horses, so we want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can get a horse accustomed to bits during the training process and the progression of headgear and bitting rigs that we use on our horses. We may start off with what we call a side pull, which is simply a rope noseband that goes over the horse's nose, and the pull comes directly from the side, so it's very similar to that we're going to have later on when we put the horse in a bit. This kind of a bitting rig is used oftentimes for starting young horses and maybe even loping older horses when we don't want to put a bit in their mouth. But if we're concerned about how hard we may have to pull on them to get them to turn or stop, then this is a good choice because it gets them accustomed to pull from the side and giving their face and getting supple without actually putting a bit in their mouth. The next bit that we're going to use is what we call a snaffle bit, and this is basically a D-ring snaffle. And what makes this a snaffle is that the pull on the horse comes directly on the side of the mouthpiece. There's no curb action whatsoever. This one actually has a connector strap to keep from pulling the bit through the horse's mouth and to keep it positioned properly. But the pull, when we pull on this bit, comes directly to the side and to the corners of the mouth. So this is very important. This is the bit we often use on young horses when we first start them. Once we've had their teeth checked, we make sure they don't have any wolf teeth and we're not going to create any injuries. We start them with a plain snaffle bit. There are lots of variations of snaffles. There's O-ring snaffles, there's D-ring snaffles, there's half cheek and full cheek snaffles. But once again, the snaffle, the terminology snaffle refers to the direction of the pull, not the fact that it's a broken mouthpiece, because we can have broken mouthpiece bits of other types that I'm going to show you in just a moment. Okay, sometimes if we want a little bit more control on our horse, we might go to what we call a twisted wire snaffle. Once again, this bit pulls directly from the side. It simply has a different mouthpiece to lighten the horse up, and this is really good for an older horse that maybe we need to get a little more direction control, but yet we need a little bit more control in their mouth. A twisted wire snaffle is not a legal bit for Western performance horses. For Western performance classes, the snaffle mouthpiece must be smooth metal, not twisted, without any ridges or sharp edges on it. So very important. Another variation of headgear that we use that doesn't have a mouthpiece is what we call a Bosal. Okay, this is a Rawhide Bosal that just goes over the horse's nose. It's used once again for young horses, and we can actually show our horses. We have what we call hackamore classes where we use these Rawhide Bosals as a headgear to actually show in those classes. It's also for young horses, and then we progress them up to a more standard bit. The next type of bit that we have is what we call a curb bit. This is a kind of a standard curb bit. Okay, we need to talk a little bit about some of the things that determine the severity of the bit. The most important thing that determines the severity of the bit is the rider's hands, obviously. Okay, that goes without saying. A rider with tough hands and that are not soft, who doesn't give when the horse responds to pressure, can be tough with any kind of bit in the horse's mouth. So that's very important. The next thing obviously is the type of bit. A snaffle bit is less severe than a curb bit. And then the next thing that we talk about in determining the severity of the bit is the type of mouthpiece. Is it a smooth mouthpiece or is it a twisted wire or rough mouthpiece? So the type of mouthpiece, also the diameter of the mouthpiece. The larger the diameter, the more spread out the pressure is on that horse's tongue, cheeks, and bars inside the mouth, so it's less severe the larger the diameter to a point. Very small diameter bits are going to be much more severe as far as the diameter of the mouthpiece. The next thing we need to talk about is the port, the size of the port. A higher port is going to be more severe than a medium port. Also, the shape of the port is going to be more severe. Sometimes we have a mouthpiece that's basically a solid bar or only has a gentle curve, and that mouthpiece is going to be much more severe than one like this that has a little bit of room for the horse's tongue and they can actually get off of that pressure. Other things that determine the severity of the bit is whether it's a rigid or swivel cheek piece, the length of the shank, and the length of the cheek piece here also determines the severity of the bit. The longer the cheek piece, the more severe it's going to be. The longer the shank, the more severe it's going to be, because we can get a lot more leverage into that bit. So this particular bit right here is a fairly mild bit from the standpoint of a solid mouthpiece, solid sided curved bit. It also has a little bit of a sweep back, so it's a little bit less severe than some of the others. Okay, one of the types of bits that we often go to in our progression during the bitting process is that since we've already had a broken mouthpiece bit in the horse's mouth, we often go to something like this, which is what we call a swivel shank broken mouthpiece curb bit. It does have a curb chain, it has a curb action, but it's what we call a broken mouthpiece swivel cheek curb bit. That allows us a little bit more flexibility. It does, whenever we take a hold of this bit, it doesn't immediately put pressure on the horse, so it gives just a little bit more reaction time for our cues. And so this is a less severe bit than some of the other ones that I'm going to show you in just a minute. This is one that we often use in a progression of training, going from a snaffle bit to a curb bit. The next one I'm going to show you is a variation of what we call, once again, a broken mouthpiece, swivel cheek, curb bit, but this one actually has a port in it. And this is what's commonly called in the training community a correction bit. Once again, it has a port, but everything swivels, so when we pull on this bit, we've got a lot of give and we've got a lot of time lapse between the actual pull and when the curb chain and the bit puts pressure on the horse's mouth and on the bottom of their chin. So once again, this is a good progression bit, going from our broken mouthpiece curb bit like this to a bit that actually has a port in it and has room for the horse's tongue and can put some pressure on the horse's tongue as we're pulling on it. So this is what we call a type of correction bit. The next bit that I want to show you is very similar in that it has swivel cheeks. So we have some, once again, some delay in the pull, and it's not quite as rigid as some of the other solid mouthpiece bits that are solid on the side. And this one actually has a square mouthpiece. It's what we call a box or a mullen mouth mouthpiece or port. And this is a good bit. Once again, it's a transition from one that we would call a correction bit to one that's more solid. In the latter stages of training, when a horse is what we call a finished horse, then we may go to something more like this that actually is solid sides, a little higher port for a little finer control. And this one is actually one that we use on cutting horses. We have this smaller diameter chain that puts a little more pressure on when we need it, but it stays loose when we're not pulling on them, because most cutting horses are shown with a completely loose rein. But when we do want to pull on them, we want plenty of slack in that curb chain until we get a hold of them. So this is a solid mouthpiece, solid sided, medium port, curb bit for the finished horse. Another type of bit that we might see is a bit with a roller in it. Those association rules also require the bit to have a leather curb chain or leather curb strap without a chain. And so this one has a leather curb strap and a roller to fit the association requirements of a bit with a roller. The last bit I'm going to show you is one that we call a half-breed. It's not a true spade, but this type of bit is only used for the advanced horse that's fully trained, and obviously because it's very rigid. It's got a straight shank here. The mouthpiece is also rigid. It only requires a small amount of leverage to get a response for this bit, so it's only for the finished performance horse. Actually has a copper roller in it to soften the mouth and to keep the tongue busy. And this is a great bit for the advanced horse. Is used for a lot for Western performance events. For a horse that's fully trained, that requires only a small amount of movement or a small amount of pressure to get this horse to respond. It's often used with a set of Rommel reins, which are these type of reins that are held in one hand. When we use a Rommel, they are held in one hand with the end of the Rommel held in the other hand, and there's a certain way that we have to hold this that makes it legal. We have to hold it in this fashion with our rein in front of the saddle horn and the end of the Rommel held in the off hand. Okay, no fingers between the reins are allowed. When we use a regular set of split reins, we normally hold those with one finger between the reins, with the bite of the end of the reins going off the same side as the hand that we're holding with. So in this case, the end of the reins would be going off to the left side of the horse, and I'm holding these with one finger between them. This allows me to make slight adjustments in my rein length as I'm riding, and if I cross my reins in this manner, this is illegal in Western performance events. I must hold the reins together with no more than one finger between them. And when we're using a snaffle bit, we must hold the reins crossed over with both hands in this fashion. This is the legal way to hold a snaffle bit rein in the Western performance horse. Once again, it's very important that we select the right bit and that we start off with the mildest bit that we possibly can to get the job done. There's no reason to not even ride an older horse in a snaffle bit if that's all we need to get the job done. We want to use the mildest bit that is effective, and the reason we go to a little bit more severe bit later on is not necessarily because we need something that's more severe that puts more pressure on the horse's mouth. It's because it requires much less movement of our hand and much less pressure to get the job done, whether we're stopping, turning, doing rollbacks, or whatever the case might be. So that's the reason why we have this progression of bits from very mild snaffles all the way up to a more rigid bit that requires much less pressure to get the job done in the performance classes.